Hello and welcome to our third season of Creative Glue. I'm your host, Scott Robinson, and today I'm joined by Kris Evans from LA. Kris is an incredibly talented and diverse makeup artist and stylist who built an impressive career spanning theatre, film, and television. Her portfolio includes iconic films including The Hunger Games, Sex and the City, National Treasure, Coyote Ugly, and Pirates of the Caribbean. Not to mention she's won a Hollywood Film Festival award for her work on X-Men: The Last Stand. She's worked face-to-face with Hollywood royalty, think Sir Ben Kingsley, Anthony Hopkins, Matthew McConaughey. That's just to name a few. And Kris has also collaborated with some of the biggest names in fashion, such as Ralph Lauren and Calvin Klein. And she's appeared in the pages of Vogue, Elle, Vanity Fair, and Mary Claire. So she's got a bit in the tank there. Kris, with such an extraordinary background, I'm excited to hear more from you today and your journey. And what led you here today is you didn't always dream of becoming a makeup artist. You originally had intentions of becoming a stand-up. Quite the changing career path. Can you tell me what sort of led you to makeup artistry?
Well, I mean, it could be many different stories. With stand-up acting, I just loved the theater. I loved performing. I loved everything about it. I started dancing when I was a young kid, and you just when you're bit by the bug, it really doesn't make any difference what you do. I just loved everything about it. And when I went to New York, you have to eat, of course, and so you have to have a job. And I didn't really want to do a 9 to 5, and I kind of wanted to be on a set. And I mean, very quickly, I was working at a university. I taught university for a while, so I was working at a university, and there was a woman there who was doing hair and makeup, and I worked with her on musical theater and opera, and she kind of trained me how to do wigs and stuff for the stage. So when I went to New York, I had some experience under my belt of what to do. It wasn't like I just kind of showed up and kind of pulled things out and said, okay, let's wing it. I kind of had an idea, but I just figured I'll put my name into the Makeup Artist Hairstylist Union. And, if I can get on sets and see what's going on. I mean, I was, come on, I was coming from Ohio. So it wasn't exactly like I was coming from LA or some real big, London, anything fancy. It was just, I was a midwest kid. So when I put my name in, about 2 weeks later, it's crazy. They said, okay, you get your makeup together. You're going to go to this place. Someone's called in sick per se, and you have to go. And it was Barbara Walters.
Wow.
And so I stayed with her for 2 years. And with that, I got into the union and started working for ABC. And through that, started working with the NBC and CBS. And so, I mean, it kind of snowballed. I was really lucky. And I really loved it. I mean, I sounds crazy. I mean, the other was, it's a wacko way of life. And so is this, but this is safe because you're behind the camera and you're not so out there. And it's really kind of interesting when I work with a lot of, well-known actors. They're actually really private and really quiet in real life. And then they go on the camera and they turn it on, but in real life. And so I was kind of like that in real life and in camera. So I just figured this is a pretty good place for me to be. And not too bad with, Barbara Walters. She worked with everybody. So she taught me so much, really smart. And one of the first, was really the first female journalist in her field. And so she was tough. And she taught me very quickly, you better bring your A game or you're going to be unemployed.
Yeah, I mean, what a first job.
Yeah, I mean, one of my first jobs with her was the presidential debates. Yeah, with Reagan. We go back now with Reagan and Mondale. And so we went to Louisville, and she was the one who was running the thing, Barbara. And, and there are people, Diane Sawyer and all those guys, but she was it. She was the person. So, that's pretty heady right there. And just
That's
kind of
a baptism of fire straight up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And she, like I said, she interviewed everyone. So you knew when to speak and when not to speak.
Yeah.
Fine art, really.
And before that, I mean, you've got quite an extensive education that you've got a great background in that. I mean, what influence did that education then have on your actual career?
Well, for me, I mean, I taught university for 8 years. I have a master's degree in designs. I'm a big, big fanatic about education in any way, shape, or form. I think anytime you go into a job, if you can talk intelligently about what they're doing or where they are or understand the situation, and I don't mean that in a pretentious way. If they ask you a question, you get it. I mean, you're up, especially working with Barbara, you're up on world affairs. You kind of know what's going on. Your history is really important so that when they're with you, they're comfortable. They know that you're not going to be a crazy person. They know that you will show up and sort of just blend into the background while they do their thing. I mean, I said this before. I jokingly say a makeup artist is a shrink who makes them look good for half the price. You really are. I mean, it is my job to make sure that when they go in front of a camera, they don't think about anything else but what they're saying. And especially back then, because, Barbara was one of the first. And then there's Jessica Savage and Diane Sawyer, but they all came after her. And it really was, I mean, I in NBC doing news and stuff with John Chancellor and Roger Mudd. I mean, these are iconic. They're like Walter Cronkite. You don't mess around. You go in, your mouth shut, you do your job, and you go home. And I was fortunate in that because that's what really kept me working. And then, I mean, I never took a full-time job. I mean, I was with Barbara, but she wasn't there every day. So I would take jobs in between where she was booked. So I always made sure that I did many different jobs. So, for instance, I would do fashion. And because I knew fashion history, because I taught that, so I understood what style was and what it looked like when I saw designers and I saw where their ideas were. Because fashion repeats itself really once every 7 years. Like right now, the 80s is really big. And so, so it's nothing's new. Everything's been done. And when you know that and you know where it all comes from and you come to the job with an education, it gave me the confidence to know that when I spoke about something, I just didn't wing it. And I made very sure. I mean, it's so great now with IMDb. I know this sounds crazy. I go to interview with someone or I go to see someone. I go on IMDb or whatever, and I find out what they've done. Yep. And I see their resumes, and I get as much information as possible. Not to say that I talk about it. That doesn't matter. Yep. But I understand where they're coming from. So
and having that ability to, as you say, make them feel comfortable and put them in that positive space. I mean, a lot of the time I imagine, before they hit the set, you're the last person that they've got contact with. They're moving from one place to another. And I get thinking about more character roles is, how much does that influence when you're doing that makeup and that artist or that actor needs to move from who they are to who they're meant to be as a character, and you're part of that makeup process of helping them to create that character. I mean,
there's many. I mean, National Treasure, it was everything from George Washington-ish, all the way. So that was kind of everything. Pirates is, I just did an Uber Eats commercial with Cher that's in Australia. And we were, they were talking about, okay, we want these pilgrims and we want like 16th century and so forth. And so you have to do those characters, which was much like the pirates we did in Pirates. So every job you do leads you to another thing. I was doing a TV show, Big Sky, and there was a character where he plays two characters. He plays his brother, and who's a bad guy, and then him is a good guy. And he wanted to be different, but he didn't want to do prosthetics, and he didn't want it to be so different. And he was a really wonderful actor and very experienced and really smart. And I said, have you ever thought of using teeth? And he goes, I never have. I said, because it changes your speech and whatever. And he was having a hard time kind of finding where he wanted to go. So we did the teeth. He shows up, he puts them in. They say, do a little video, does a little video for the producers. He shuts it off. He stands up and he turns to me. He goes, thank you. I just found my character.
Yeah, wow.
And it was the teeth. Yep. And I had done another actor with the same kind of thing. And so said to him, hey, did you think of? And those are the things. I mean, yes, we do prosthetics and, transfers and all that kind of stuff to change. And you see that even more so now. I mean, every film that you see now has tremendous amount of prosthetics. What I love to see, I mean, when I did Megalopolis, it was practical. and there wasn't really prosthetics. We were working on human faces, which you find now rare, really. A lot of the things that you see that are really quote unquote popular have a lot of prosthetics to them. And believe me,
amazing,
incredible talent. I don't take away from any of it. It's everything is an art. Incredible art people do.
And so you obviously then work with those prosthetic experts as well to then coordinate to how you get to the final product that we see on screen.
Well, interestingly enough, many years ago when I was doing Saturday Night Live, we had bald caps. We had all this stuff. I worked with Dana Carvey, and so he was, George Bush and Churchill, all those characters. And so there were all different kinds of things. So I did those. And so I know the process. I know how to do it. When you're department heading and you're overseeing a production and you have both, it's very tricky to jump in and do everything. So if you're smart, when people ask me what's the best trick, you delegate. You hire really great people who understand your vision and the director's vision, which is really the important thing, and the actor's vision, and you are literally a team. And so I understand it. I know what needs to be ordered and done, and I can look at it and say, well, this coloration, and that's all just the experience of the years. But you also trust the people you're working with. And I always say it's about the work. That's the bottom line.
And I mean, you talked before about Megalopolis and that importance of working with the director. I mean, that's one that's got all the ingredients for success. I mean, why do you think it's had such mixed reviews, considering
Well, so did Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
And nobody wanted it, and he paid for it. Now he owns it, and it's done pretty well for him.
Yeah.
He's bought some vineyards, and he's done okay. So I think personally, it was one of the highlights of my career. First of all, because it's Francis Ford Coppola. I mean, come on. Just watching him work with actors alone. And by the way, pretty iconic actors. I mean, we could do the list, right? From John Voight and Dustin Hoffman to Adam Driver and Talia Shire and Chloe, Feynman and Aubrey Plaza and Shia LaBeouf. And, we could go on and on. Jason Schwartzman. And I mean, I could go on and on and on. They've kind of been around.
Very much so.
And when they come in to work with Francis, who they admire tremendously, I will say across the board, everyone that came into that trailer was amazing because they knew they were making something special with someone, regardless of whether people buy it or not. They were there for Francis, and they knew this was his vision that took him 20 years to do. And by the way, directed, produced, wrote, and paid for.
Wow.
And it was his money. So that in itself, and then Milena Canonero, who was the costume designer, between her and Francis, they have 9, 10, 11 Oscars. So you're going to argue with them? I mean, really? Come on. I mean, they kind of show great promise. And so I think personally, 10 years from now, people are going to look, I mean, if you really look at it now and you look at what's happening now, it's not that, and he wrote it 20 years ago. So I mean, I don't know. I have the utmost respect for him, listening to him talk to the actors. It was very, and I hate to say old school, everybody rolls their eyes, but there, we had quote unquote, the video, of course, because they shot it, digital. It wasn't shot in film. He wanted to shoot it in film, but they said, no, we're going to do digital. So they did. And so you had the screen, but there was no video village where, 50 people were standing around. There wasn't any of that. There was a screen you could go and see where it was, because that's when you knew what was happening. And then Francis sat in a short director's chair with an iPad and a script supervisor next to him. And he was watching the action as they were. And he was literally talking to the actors very close to them. So he wasn't in another room. He was right next to the actors. And so, again, none of this is a criticism. It's changed. So we accept it. We see where it is, all of that. I'm not trying to say it should be one way or the other. But I will tell you, the relationship he had with the actors, and to watch that is pretty special.
Yeah, it's amazing that whole creative process and how, it has changed with digitization and how we go about being creative and the technology that drives that. And I guess creative glue itself is about those ingredients, about what it is that makes people creative. And yes, we have new tools today, but there's
Yeah.
an underlying part that makes us creative in our approach and our ability to do our craft, whatever that might be. I
And
mean,
the pure, yeah, to be that pure, you know what I mean? I mean, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I've worked with directors that are, I was working when there were walkies. There was no
yeah,
cell phones. There was none of that. Your eye looked at what was happening. There was no video village. There was no monitors. It was film. So you look to see the overall picture, which is such incredible training.
yeah, to know when you can see 360, but there's such a narrow piece that you're capturing at that moment. Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
And I mean, you talked before about that your own creative process and really diving into that background. Can you just give us a bit more of an idea about your creative process? I've been fortunate enough to shoot, a fair share of TV commercials and those sorts of things in my time. Never, feature films. I'm in ad land and the dark side of the creative industries, as many people refer to it. But like that working with makeup artists, it's I find it really intriguing to see their process of how they transform. So, I love the fact that there's even more background that you bring to us. So I'd love to hear more about what that creative process looks like for you.
Well, it's funny because I don't really go to Instagram and Pinterest and all that. I mean, I do. Don't get me wrong. I look at, okay, fine. That's not where I get my ideas. I get my ideas from painters, from outside in nature. And I don't mean this to be glib or to be, pretentious or anything. I really don't. I am an artist. That's what I do. I'm a painter that puts makeup on a face, and the face is the canvas, and my makeup is the paint. And I have seen people who they're very talented, but if you don't know color, you're screwed. That's number
Yeah,
one. And the way you learn color is to study the masters. It's just, I mean, there's a special right now of, Leonardo da Vinci, forget about it. I mean, the guy's genius. Obviously, he's done he doesn't just paint. It's like, oh my God, when did the man sleep, right? But it's the same. You look at Van Gogh, you look at what he did with colors. It's all the same. I look at old magazines. I look at old books. I look at Life magazines, old time magazines, and I see the actual photographs of, especially if I'm doing a period piece, to really look to see, they jokingly say, because, okay, so I worked in the 80s and they go, oh, it's an 80s film, kind of research. I said, are you kidding me? I'll bring in pictures of me. When you're asking me about 80s, I'll tell you about 80s. And I lived in Paris and New York. So, I was really
wow.
fortunate. I went to the clubs and, saw all of that. So that's research, my photographs, my tear sheets, my Polaroids, all of that stuff. It's all research of what it is. And so I don't think you are ever know enough. I don't. I mean, when we did X-Men 3, it was with Brett Ratner. And, he didn't want all of the kind of crazy prosthetic stuff and all that. I mean, there was Beast and there, Juggernaut and all those guys. But he wanted the mutants to look human and not human. And he wanted to know something was off, but he didn't want a ton of prosthetics. And there's an engraver from the 1600s called Charles Lebrun. And he did sketches of humans and animals, like a goat, and put them together and what they would look like if you put those together. And that's what I used for the research for the mutants. Wow. So that when you saw them, they looked different, but you weren't quite sure why. And it was that kind of, and I showed it to him and he was like, oh yeah, absolutely. And so it's that kind of connection that because again, we all know in this industry, you literally fly by the seat of your pants, especially television. I mean, every day you come in, oh yeah, by the way, that thing that we did? Well, can you throw a little bit more? Oh yeah, okay, fine. You know what I mean? Oh, and you got 15 minutes. When I did Free State of Jones, there was like 175 soldiers out on a field And it was during the Civil War, right? So it was all kinds of bodies and, prosthetics and all. And Gary Ross was the director. I'll never forget. He goes, you know what? Could you just kill that guy right there for me? I'm like, what? Yeah, could you just shoot him? Just go ahead and shoot him. And I literally just pulled out, the whole thing, bullet hole, threw it in, blood. He goes, yeah, that's good. Yeah, shoot that. Yeah, kill this guy over here. Swear to God, true story. First day. First day.
Just run around set killing people.
Oh, yeah. And then the guy would go, hurry up, the sun's going down. And I'll never forget, Gary turns and goes, she's working. She's killing him. We'll be right there. I mean, swear to God. And so you just, Mahershala Ali couldn't grow a beard. All those beards in that movie are fake.
Wow.
On Mahershala.
This one's real. So
I was going to say, I wanted to comment on how fabulous your beard is, because some specialties is hair work.
Yeah, wow.
And it's funny, I look at your beard and another TV show, the guy had a beard like this, and they were bringing him in. And, it was a match from when they had shot him before. And he got a job the day before and decided to shave. And at 3:00 the day before, said, by the way, the guy coming in that had that long white beard, he doesn't have it anymore. So you need to match what 3:00 the day before. So you get a beard and you dye it and cut it and you hand lay it. And but this is what I mean by education and research. Mm-hmm. This is the kind of stuff that nowadays, especially, there's never enough time. There's never enough people. Come on. This is nothing new. I'm you experience it, everyone you've spoken to, it's all the same. You fly by the seat of your pants. Yeah. And some of the best work is done that way. Some of the scary.
And how do you think, if there's, a young person that's wanting to crack into the creative industries, it's obviously an amazing industry to get into. And I think there's, a lot of glamour that might sit around it until you work out exactly how much hard work's actually involved and what's really in there, because they only see the shiny.
Yeah.
How does someone in today's world start to gain that sort of experience? I mean, that there's you lean into so much of those things that you've gone through, from your education to your natural experiences that you've gathered through an amazing career. Where does someone begin?
Well, they're very lucky now because there's the internet. And there's a lot of YouTube how-tos. So, which is, you do the old-fashioned, watch them, work. I mean, literally a friend of mine just the other day was doing a commercial. The guy had shaved a beard, and he had to do this commercial, and he had to have the beard that they wanted, to do. And she called me and went, oh, God. And I go, okay, come on over. And the two of us in the garage, she had a beard. Okay, we'll do this, blah, 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 blah. Showed, and we practiced and we did, all the stuff. And she was very experienced as well. She's fantastic. But the two of us were able to say, okay, what about this? And, troubleshoot this. And she sent me a picture of it. It was so great. And she goes, they didn't even know he shaved. And that is what education is. That's what practicing is. She didn't walk in and go, oh, no. Before she got there, she did the work. Yeah. And you got to do the work in anything.
Very true.
I was reading an article with Timothy Chalamet about the Bob Dylan thing. And he said, they started 5 years ago. And then the pandemic hit, and then the strike hit. But he had 5 years. He learned how to play the guitar and sing. And all that singing you hear in that film is live. It's him. And it's amazing. And he just said, thank God I had the time. But he did the work. And so with anything, you can be lucky. You can go, hey, that's pretty great. But I will rely all the time on the work that I did. And don't say no to anything. Don't say no to anything. You never know where it'll get you. And, I don't want to bore your listeners or whatever, but the first really big break I got in LA, I wasn't even living in LA. And I saw it in the paper. It's not that anymore, but you could go on production bulletins or whatever, and you see certain things. And you see this and you go, maybe they're going to be here for 3 weeks. So send in a resume. Honest to God, true story. Knew no one. But on that resume, I'd worked with a director that was pretty well known. So the person directing the movie was British. And they saw the resume and they called me up and they said, so we'd like to fly you, because I wasn't living in LA at the time. We'd like to fly you in to meet the director. And I said, to do 3 weeks on the movie? And they said, no, the department had the movie. Because I had worked with Ridley Scott and he saw that on my resume. I knew no one.
Incredible.
I went, what? They go, yeah, we'll fly you in. It was Con Air. Yeah. 100 tattoos a day on 18 guys. And we shot it for 7 months. That was my first Bruckheimer movie. And since then, I've done 9 of them. Knew no one. You
Incredible.
never know. And going into that, was I scared? Absolutely. But then once it was there, okay, now what? And you just, had I not worked with that person, 10 years I spent in New York, so I had a resume, but it doesn't matter. What this movie was is not what I had done. It's completely new. And so I had great people working with me, but everybody's seen Con Air. It's, but it was.
Put the bunny back in the box,
Oh my God. Right? Oh my God. And it was like Dave Chappelle's first time. So freaking funny, that guy. It was just, and this is a while back, but my point is, yes, things have changed, but you never know. You never know.
And you work with some massive Hollywood stars and people with such high profiles. Have you got any sort of favorite memories or standouts in your experiences? There must be some amazing tales.
Yeah. I think probably the highlights, and I always say this, I did a film called Bad Company with Chris Rock and Anthony Hopkins, which I'm sure is not one of his, all-time high ones, he puts on the top of his resume, but needless to say, but it was great. It was, New York and Prague. I had a blast. But Tony is also an incredible musician, an unbelievable musician, pianist. And so I remember in New York, he was such a kind guy. And I'm telling you, he wants you to call him Tony. Because I said, is it Mr. Hopkins? Or is it, no, he's not going to talk to you if you just don't call him Tony. He is the kindest. He's an amazing human being. Anyway, so he would tell them, oh, no, she's got to take more time for my makeup. And then he would say to me, I wrote something last night. I want you to hear this. And he had a keyboard in his trailer. And he would play me this classical symphony of what he had been writing. Cut to, it was produced. And I saw it and watched it on television with he and his wife in the audience performing the piece he had written that he had played in the trailer for me. So those are the moments. There was also another time, I don't want to bore, everybody, but this is what I mean by, I love classical music. So for me, it was, but a long time ago, I was doing an interview and Ray Charles had been inducted into the Music Hall of Fame. And so they were going to interview him and it was going to be for a thing. And it wasn't Tom Waits, the guy who did "You Are So Beautiful." Why am I blanking? Is the musician? Anyway, he was like in love with the musician. Ray Charles was his hero. And so he says, Joe Cocker. So we're doing an interview with the two of them, and it's an empty ballroom, and it's 9 of us, and we're going to be doing a clip of the two of them. Ray Charles comes in and goes, "I'm not playing. I'm tired. Let's just sit down. Let's just do blah 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 blah." Joe Cocker talks about how as a kid in Wales, and he inspired him. He was so unbelievable. And he kind of got emotional. And Ray Charles goes, shit, okay. And he sits down at the piano and he plays "You Are So Beautiful" and Joe Cocker. And he sing the song. And there's 9 of us in this room.
Oh.
And I'm thinking, okay, this is kind of a cool job. That's a moment, and I haven't told that story in so long, but, God bless them both now, but just that kind of moment where they're the greats.
Yep. They're the special moments that, unless you're ingrained within that, you don't see those things. You don't get those small magical pieces.
That's also part of what makes what I do so great, because I could never work in an office 9 to 5. As long. No way. As hard as those 17-hour days are sometimes, 90-hour weeks, it's still, what can I tell you?
Yeah.
I'm still
And
like,
the names just keep rolling. Do you ever find any of those people, intimidating to work with, or
yes.
is it just that they're so different off screen? Like
No, I'm nervous every time I go to a job. I don't care what it is. Every time. And I truly believe that's what keeps you working. Because if I came to a job and just went, oh, yeah, I got this. First of all, it's not fun for me. Because if I don't prepare and I don't make sure that I even have more than I need, or I haven't done ridiculous research so that when I walk in the door, there's not a question in my head. If something pops up, I go, okay, I got this. Not to say it's always perfect or that I've completely succeeded every time. I'd be lying if I did. Trust me, the shit doesn't hit the fan. But for the most part, when that does, you never forget. And the next time, you know what to do.
yeah, yeah, that's when you really lean on that experience to go,
And you're
okay, I've
really
got to
happy.
pivot here. What do I
Yes, exactly. Oh my God, maybe they didn't hear about it. I'm standing on another
do?
set.
And I mean, and again, incredible projects, not just incredible people. You've worked on, as we said before, Coyote Ugly and Pirates of the Caribbean, Hunger Games, X-Men 3. It's a massive resume. Is there one that stands out that's most, I suppose, either memorable or meaningful for you that you've worked on that you look back on and go, that's the one?
Well, believe it or not, I mean, it's been a while. I mean, of course, Megalopolis, like I said, that was pretty great. X-Men 3 was a $250 million movie. I had 4 units, 50 makeup artists working 24/7, round the clock. Yeah. We had a second unit. Then we had special effects makeup artists with the main cast. Then we had the ones where they do the dots, right, for the CGI. Had that one. So we had 4 units working constantly. That was 90, 100-hour weeks. And that's the one, I won the award for, which, by the way, I had no clue. And someone called me and said, hey, did you know? I seriously, I didn't. But I even still run into and still work with people that on that movie. I mean, Ian McCullough and Patrick Stewart are so freaking funny together. Again, you see the talent. I mean, what people do with the sets, when the people and the costumes. I mean, Penny Rose for Pirates. I mean, we were I'm telling you, I don't want to again sound like this is, oh, really? Everyone is so different, and all of them are such experiences. I mean, Saturday Night Live, it's live.
Yeah.
When you watch it on Saturday, it's not like, oh, wait, I'm not ready. It's live. And you better be able to get them. And there's, catwalks that you run under to get to another set with little twinkle lights. And you've got, all the stuff, and they're ripping off wigs and clothes and, and it's 3 and 4 minutes change. And, that's it. I mean, you ask another one, these are back in the day, but they're kind of fun as when Paul Simon, he did Graceland, and they did on Saturday Night Live. And I was working doing an actress and behind stage. And, all of a sudden you hear these South African dancers coming with all of the bells. And you hear Paul Simon going, Grace. I mean, and people were out of their minds. They were standing on the chairs. They were going crazy. And we all like, yeah, this is going to be a hit. I mean,
Wow.
but there are moments like that. I mean, even sports moments, because I did the Olympics with Bob Costas. I did 7 of them. And we were in the cube when Michael Phelps was swimming, and he broke the records.
Yeah.
So you're there, and everybody's, all this stuff. And it's surreal. Some of the things I've experienced, I think, is this for real? Is this happening? You think it's going to be a certain way, and then you're standing and you go, oh yeah, no, it's so much better. It's so much better.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, in terms of, I suppose, where we're headed with the creative industries, I mean, it's, you talked about that sort of shift and that change, directors' roles and those sorts of things. And now we've got prosthetics and, green dots on everybody because we'll deal with that in post. Is there a future without makeup artistry, or do you still think that craft is such an integral part as it is having actors and directors and producers? I mean, will we ever lose that?
Well, are you moving towards AI? Is that where we're going? No, no,
Look, I
I'm
mean,
just
that
saying,
it's a no.
you know,
Like again,
well, listen,
where
it is a
do we all
conversation,
go?
but it is a conversation, and we
Mm,
have to embrace it.
mm,
People, regardless of what you think, that way they would go, oh, those computers. Okay, where are we now? You know, okay, and everybody. I mean, cell phones, really? I mean, we used to use big box. We had nothing, nothing.
yeah,
You iPhone. I mean, and I don't sound like the dinosaur. I'm just saying you have to embrace it because it's going to happen. So
yeah.
if you fight it, this is what I mean by education.
Mm,
If you, as a makeup artist, I know as a human and as an artist, you are not going to replace me.
yeah,
I don't care what you do with AI. I just saw the film Here, and it was Bob Zemeckis, and a lot of it was, generated and so forth and so on. Yes, some of it was really great, but I'm telling you, not the same. And, again, with Megalopolis, I'm telling you, Adam had a thing on his eye, but most of it was practical with no CGI, no prosthetics. It was humans with humans. Here's the other thing that I truly believe is important: relationships. Because an actor, if you take that away, that passion of where they are and why they're doing what they're doing, I don't think a computer is ever going to replace that. I may be wrong. I may be totally wrong. But the passion I have for what I do, the relationships I've had with actors, the discussions to bring them to come day by day to, and the makeup trailer is the green room to go in and have the discussions the actors have with each other and about the scripts and what it is, and outside of the director or the producer or the studio. And that kind of mesh, you're never going to get with AI.
no.
So if you
And I
want,
think it's even that ability. You could program empathy, you can program responses, but I have a great belief in that energy transfer that happens between human beings, and that transcends any ability to mimic, because if you feel that, when you're having a conversation with someone, when you're standing with someone, when you're in the room with somebody, you talk about that moment with Joe Cocker and Ray Charles, I'm not sure that anything can emulate the way that moment feels. And so therefore, to mimic that on screen, I think until you get real emotion and real passion and someone's putting something real into it, it's never going
same
to
way
feel
with
quite the
opera,
same.
or the same way with
Mm,
live theater. I say design, it opened in England first, but when they came to the United States, the American cast, I oversaw and did and worked with both Phantom of the Opera and Miss Saigon. Those are connections. And so I saw Phantom with Michael Crawford 27 times because, we did more than,
one
and
of my
then,
favorites.
yeah. And every night, and you can't do the audience in AI. You can't do that spontaneity. And I will say the other thing as far as teaching, which is another passion of mine, I love it. And I love writing, is when I was doing the thing for Phantom, and I was sitting in the section that you do when they were doing the previews. And one of a student that I had at the University of Cincinnati when I was teaching there years ago, I heard him say, Kris, we're in New York. And I looked up, and here's a guy who was in my class who couldn't thread a needle. I'm telling you, he could not sew to save his life, and he was a designer. He said, can I sit with you? I made 2 of the costumes for the masquerade, and I want you to see my work. That, to me, you'll never get that in AI.
No, no,
Never. And
that's
his
that
work
relationship.
was so beautiful. And to see that, to see how excited he was and how much he loved what he did, we need human connection so desperately. And our art and our passion for whatever we do. I love what I do. And I want people to have that same passion. And I think that's a human connection that you will never get in AI.
Yeah,
And AI is
definitely.
pretty amazing. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, look,
Pretty
applications.
incredible.
It's a tool. It's another thing in the
Not
toolbox.
cashing it. I really
No, no. I mean, it's here. It's not going anywhere. But it's definitely. I think it's a tool rather than an entire replacement. You
yeah,
know.
it helps.
Yeah. Yeah.
It helps.
Definitely.
And again, we have to be realistic as well in budgeting. This whole, actor strike, I mean, I won't get into it, and the writer strike and all this, the contracts. And so this is, again, people get mad. This is the reality. So instead of fighting the reality, you have to think, okay, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Where am I going to go? How am I going to change?
Yeah, and I mean, in our industry, there used to be typesetters and all those sorts of things. And what you find is then as time goes on, the craft of typography, and letter forms and glyphs, have begun to disappear. But, when you find those artists, and those designers that still care about that craft, they study those things as you've talked about, and they show that. So you see that across industries. And I guess, it's an interesting part of what we've explored on Creative Glue, because we keep seeing these threads and these ingredients that keep creative people being creative, and another aspect to that is the fact that our guests are connected as well. And I wanted to ask you about our previous guest, Tom Fennessy, because, how did you guys meet and work together?
Well, he's unbelievable. First of all, one of the funniest human beings on the planet.
He's a great guy.
He is so freaking funny. I've known Tom for a really long time. And believe it or not, I don't know. I mean, it really is funny. I lived in Park City, Utah, and I commuted. And we raised our son in the mountains, so I would commute back and forth to Los Angeles. But I came from New York City, so I had worked with a director that was directing a commercial in Los Angeles, and Tom was working on it. He calls me up and he says, we're doing this commercial. I said, oh, okay, I need this. He goes, where do you live? I said, I live in Utah. He goes, okay. So I get there, and I walk in, and he goes, so how do you know the director? And I said, well, I didn't say I was from Utah. I said, I live there. But the director I worked with for 5 years in New York City. And he goes, yeah, you don't sound like you're from Utah. I go, really? So that, when that happens, you kind of put the accent in even, and he started laughing. And we've been best friends ever since. Yeah. So he is so good at what he does. And he is such a kind person. And you need that in the business too, because it's tough. It's really tough. And it's very competitive. You were talking about, he's seen it as well. Michael Jackson in Africa. Let's talk about Katy Perry. The stuff that he's done, we did Glee together. And we did that, crazy ass commercial.
Yeah. Yeah. With Sophie as well.
Yeah. And Tom did Tom. And when I say threw it together, they threw it together. It was unbelievable. We had such a great time, but that's where the passion comes from. Yeah. That's where everybody gets together and they go, okay, how are we going to do this? And no one stands there and goes, well, I'm going to. No. Everybody kind of looks to see what somebody else is doing and what they need. Because when you're in that kind of situation, or in any situation really creatively, you better turn around and have somebody there going, what do you need? Because nobody does it by themselves. And Tom is a master of that. He really knows how to put the right people together.
Yeah, and he talked a lot about that. And he also talked about the importance of that kindness as well. I think that really came through in our chat with Tom. It's
I love about our business is, people say, oh, no, the film business or the this or that. Okay, you tell me what office works together for 17 hours in a day and then goes to dinner with each other at night and sits and laughs about the craziness of what happened that day. Or you're on location and you're so tired, but on the weekend, man, hey, let's go. Okay. And you make friends for life.
Yeah. And is that part of that ingredient in Creative Glue? Is that part of it for you?
My husband and I, we had a studio in New York City, as was a fashion style photographer when, they were shooting film, right? Hasselblad and all that. And now he works for a company and he does photography now and it's all digital. Yeah. But the knowledge of where that is and what it is, the eye for lighting, he has taught me so much about lighting that when I go to a set now, a lot of times actors or actresses will hire me to do but then they'll say, no, you're coming. I want you to take a look at it. And I'll work together with the DP to light them.
Wow.
Because it's really important, especially women, beauty. They want to be edgy and they want to sidelight. Okay, that's okay. But if that person that's not supposedly the character per se, and to soften it or to help and to understand that and to be able to speak the language, you come on a set differently.
Yeah.
And it's not
that must be a huge, yeah. I mean, it must be a huge part with that language and that ability to interact and talk between those various different parts of our craft, and that's that wealth of experience again that has such a profound importance.
For X-Men, I just go back, Dante Spinotti, who was the DP, wonderful, beautiful, elegant Italian man. I said to him, the close-up of Femke, and he goes, no, darling, don't worry. I've created a light just for her. So don't worry. If you need something, you tell me, and we will work together. It's like, okay, he's done a couple things. He did a pretty film called LA Confidential, which was, he made it look okay. And it was, my God, how wonderful, and very, very quietly, just, oh, no problem, darling, you just tell me what you need. And we work. It's like, oh, my God. And the same way with the DPO on Megalopolis. Lovely man, the same. He looks beautiful. You just let me know what I can do to help you. I mean, that's everything, really. And that's the creative glue.
Yeah.
That's
I love that. I love that.
Very true.
And I guess, in all of this, is there anything that, is there a piece of advice you've been given that sort of stands out, that you sort of go, that's something that's really helped to shape me, or shape my career? Is there one of those moments for you?
Again, I don't want to sound moony, honest to God, but life. I wake up every single day. Right now, I'm very lucky. I live 45 stairs on top of a hill, and I have a 55-mile view of the valley. And I'm always looking at how the light hits the mountains. I'm always looking what the colors are when the seasons change. I always look when the sun is setting. I go out into my yard and I look at I have bird feeders. I love bird feeders. And I watch the birds and I watch how they do. And I watch what's on TV, specific things. I go to museums. I go to the theater and watch it. I love live performances. I never want to be complacent in my life. Once you do that, you die. I don't care what age you are. I don't care what you do for a living. I don't even care if you don't have any money. One of my favorite places in LA is called the Descanso Gardens. And it's this beautiful place that I'm a member of, and I go every once in a while and I just walk and I just think. And if I'm on a project or something, I'll just walk around and think about what it is, or a museum, or I have, Taschen's one of my favorite book companies because they have the most beautiful books of artists, and I'll just page through and I'll just look for ideas. And that for me sparks the excitement. I love paging through the New York Times, the actual physical Sunday New York Times, because it's not the same than on the internet. When you page through the lifestyle and you see the fabulous photographs and the beautiful coloring and the lighting, and you hold it in your hand, there's nothing like it. And that's
something about that tangibility.
Yes. It's so simple. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money, and I know people, are afraid of what's going on or where. Every single day I get up and I just know. I've also done yoga for 52 years. I know that sounds crazy. I did it when I was like 3, right?
Exactly. Straight out the womb into the yoga.
And I only tell you that because I was doing it when there were pajama bottoms and T-shirts. There's no Lululemon. It wasn't designer. It was very, very simple. But it takes me back to the union of how basic it is to just connect to each other, and to know that when all is said and done, you still have yourself. And again, this is also, so I'm going to tell you, but that's the creative glue, because you have to have that in yourself. And so if you lose that and you become cynical about what is, and believe me, it's easy to do. I am no saint. I don't get up every morning and go, oh my God, it's just a me. I mean, there are days it's like, what?
We're going to do this again.
But I really believe for everyone, as rough as it is, this is all we got. This is all we got.
I love that.
We got to figure it out. Creative glue or not. And there's a lot of people that do some pretty amazing things with that glue.
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. Now, before we finish off, we like to do a little thing that we call Fast Five. 5 very quick questions, one word sort of answers, sort of quick, rapid response. You ready to go?
Yeah, it's kind of like an actor studio. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. All right. Who's your celebrity or professional crush?
Wow. You know, I mean, because it was professional, it was Tony Hopkins.
Love that. Love that. LA or London?
London.
Interesting. Favorite character you've ever worked on?
So many. You know, it's crazy to say. I did a TV show called Once Upon a Time. And there was a gentleman who played Hook, and I did age makeup on him. And the reason why I loved to do it so much was because he was so excited about it. I wanted to kill him, but he kept asking the writers to write more so that he could get into that character more. And it was an old Hook. I had such a great time because he was so excited about it. And I mean, believe me, there are many others, but I just know because he was so excited about it. And the gentleman where I did the teeth and he goes, I found my character. I mean, those are moments that you just, can I say, you can't buy that.
Awesome. Awesome. Is or naughties?
I'm sorry with the Australian accent.
That's me. The 80s, the 1980s, or the 2000s?
80s.
Is all the way.
Especially New York 80s. I was in Paris and New York in the 80s, and I got to tell you, nothing like it.
I think it was just a great period. I was lucky enough to grow up in the 80s, and I just think it was an amazing time. Some very cool stuff.
So. I mean, you can't. It was a blast. And I was one of the straight ones. I was a joking. I didn't really do drugs and drink. I really didn't. So I was always the one invited to come to babysit everybody because I was sober enough to remember what we did and I could get them in a cab. I was the parent, even though I was wild. I was straight wild.
I love it. And then our final one, best makeup brand.
Boy, that's loaded.
You're gonna make a lot of people unhappy, I'm sure.
Well, you know, listen, I can tell you some of the ones that are iconic that everybody knows. You know, there's the Chanel, there's the Dior. You know, everybody knows all of that. But I will say, to support the artists, MAC Cosmetics was really supportive, especially beginning with artists. But there's so many other wonderful. In Australia, there's an airbrush. It's an oxygen facial company called Intraceuticals, and they do skincare and all that, and they are amazing. I mean, I say my favorites are the ones who support the artists. And, you know, I could go on and I mean, you know, Billy Mac, but there's so many others that have been, you know, gosh, I could send you a list of, you know, people that have been so good to us, because even the silly little pink sponge, which is called Beauty Blender, that has taken by storm. I know the owner, and she started with nothing. And got this idea, and now forget about it. But so generous and so wonderful, and that really changed how we kind of applied makeup. She was really a genius at that. So
incredible.
That's just a few of the 90 dozen I could tell you. And we have to narrow it down. Is it beauty? Is it effects? Is it, you know, is it stage? Is it prop? Ay.
No, and that was going to be one of my other fast fives that I thought about, whether, you know, like, you know, theater, television, or film, you know, like which you would choose. We'll chuck it in there anyway. If you had to choose one.
Who is your favorite child?
And everybody's got one. They just don't like to admit it. So,
Well,
and I could say that because I was an only child, so I was definitely the favorite. So.
well, my kid's an only child as well, and he's pretty incredible. Wow. I have to say theater.
Yeah, amazing.
I have to say live theater because I admire so much. First of all, the pay is so much different than film art. It's so different. So you really have to love it because you are not going to get rich. You know what I mean? But to watch performances, the voices, the talent, God, some of the live theater I saw that wasn't musicals, the dramas, night after night after night, 8 shows a week, and still be there and still every night bring the best of the best. And I'm not saying that film and television doesn't, but you can stop and you can say, let's run it back. But on stage, baby, it separates the men from the boys. It really does, because if you go up, whoops. Yeah. I have to say the stage. And London too. I went to school in London and studied acting in London and was lucky enough actually to travel with the RC. And so I saw some live theater that was just, again, you just can't. That's why London has a special place in my heart. I love LA. Don't get me wrong. It's my friends, but I love Europe. I'm a sucker. Yeah, sucker for Europe. I haven't gotten to Australia. That's my bucket list.
There you go. There you go.
Beautiful country.
We'll put it out there. The West is best. So,
oh my God, I would love it. No,
come to the West Coast, come south. The Southwest is the most incredible part of Australia. We're going to sell it like that. So,
and there's great stuff coming out of Australia. That's for sure.
Yeah. No, we talk about it all the time. Talent isn't dictated by geography. And if COVID's done anything, it's probably connected us all in a different way globally that has allowed people to understand, that.
Yes. Well, I remember the Academy, the Motion Picture Academy. And I can remember when it was a small collection and we met in a room and there wasn't, Skype, and there wasn't Zoom. And then all of a sudden when that started to happen, the Academy just literally burst open.
Yeah.
And all of these places, New York and Europe and Australia and all over the world, people then started coming now when we have meetings of Zoom. It is literally international. And it is so wonderful to just listen to everyone. And you know what? We really are all the same.
It's very, very true. Very true. Look, thank you so much for joining us today, Kris. It's been an absolute pleasure. That's all we've got time for on this episode of Creative Glue, but please join us each month as we continue to explore the creative glue that brings us all together. Now, if you haven't already, can you check out the rest of our Creative Glue episodes? They're all available on YouTube, on Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. Simply just search Creative Glue Podcast to find us, and make sure you like and subscribe and stay tuned to see who'll be joining us next on Creative Glue. Your ideas and my ideas will stick together like glue, 'cause we've got the creative